Hi, I'm Mickey Zeta, and this is Sunday Night Wine with Mickey. So I hope you brought your own glass of wine or a bottle of water or adult beverage, whatever you're comfortable with. And I'm glad you're going to spend a few minutes with me. So this is cheers to a fabulous end of a wonderful weekend. I'm still up in Connecticut, and it's cold here. It was 62 yesterday, 43 today. So pretty soon it's going to be spring and it's going to stay. And I'm going to talk about kind of like seasons of the cycle of abuse. I've had several really good conversations with different women this week. And the question about the cycle of domestic abuse came up quite a few times. So I decided that's going to be my topic tonight. Yes, I've talked about it before, but you know what? This can never be talked about too often and too deeply because women, and I know there are men who are abused, and I don't speak to that because what I know about is women who live in abuse. But you know, it's generally the cycle begins with control. And sometimes that's control that begins as children before we even come in contact with our abuser. And control means that hey, Lisa, good to have you here. Control means that your abuser does not want you to go places or have friends or which jobs you can take and what days you can work. It's insipid. Control. And they started out like they're taking care of you, like they want this good thing for you, but it's not ever about you. It's always, always, always about them. Control is the basis really of abuse, but it starts there. And we tend to, for me, I thought it was kind of cute. I liked that my abuser, when we first started dating, I liked that he wanted to take control because it felt like that meant he cared. And he knows that. They know that, and they find women that works with, and it worked for me, it worked with me, so I walked right smack into a lot of control. And then it goes from control to, hi Alan, nice to have you here. And then it goes in from control, it goes into emotional abuse. And control is emotional abuse, but I like to separate the two because emotional abuse is so bad and so dangerous and so it gets in our minds, it gets into our heads, and it undermines who we are. It undermines who we are as women, as people, as confident individuals. It takes away our individuality, actually. Individuality is gone when we're under control and then we're in emotional abuse because suggestions are made about how we wear our hair or what time we leave the house in the morning or ideas. Our abusers will suggest ideas and we embrace it, and then pretty soon we're the bad guy because we embrace this idea that now he makes ours and really it's not. That's called gaslighting, and they're great at it. They are skilled gaslighters because they start something and pretty soon they'll turn it around and make it our fault, and that is emotional abuse. And I'm here to tell you there are so many women who lived in domestic abuse, and it was pretty much strictly control and emotional abuse, and they wonder, was I really abused? Was this really a problem? Should I have just gone along with it? Why did I feel like this was a bad thing? It felt like a bad thing because it is a bad thing. This is not a game. It is a game for them. It's a game of control and taking over your life. And those of us who have left abuse, we recognize what I'm talking about. But often, when we leave, we think, was I really abused? Was that really abuse? Or did he really care? And we don't want to give up on that. And that's part of the emotional abuse. We don't want to give up on the fact that we want to believe that our abuser really loves us. We want to believe that the nice guy who's there part of the time will be there full time. It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. But now we talked about control, and now we've talked about emotional abuse, and then there's financial abuse. Financial is horrible because I'll use my example. I worked, actually that was a requirement. When I got married, I had to have a job before we got married. My husband was in the Army. He was stationed in the United States, and that's where we were moving, and he absolutely insisted that I have a job before we got married. So I had a job, but guess what? My check was turned over to him. That's emotional abuse. And I was given a small, tiny little bit of money. I don't know if it's stipend or stipend, but I wasn't given much. And that's how I lived. And somehow I at that point, I guess I thought that was okay. We had dated for about a year. So the control, the emotional abuse, and now the financial abuse all just kind of stacked on each other. And it wasn't a red flag for me. It was something that I thought, well, that's just how it is. Well, that's not how it is. And once I got out, I realized that. And actually, part of the way into I realized that's not how it is. But it controlled. The financial control continued straight through my marriage for 34 years. He pretty well controlled the money. He said what we could buy and what we couldn't buy. And we owned businesses. I was just as involved in building those businesses as he was, but he controlled the finances. And I allowed that. I allowed that to happen. So we've talked about control, we've talked about emotional abuse, we've talked about financial abuse, and now comes the one that really is recognized as abuse, and that's the crime of it. If you don't have bruises, if you don't have a black eye or bruises that show up on your body, then we don't consider it control. And some of us, even when we have that, we don't consider it control. But that's the fourth. And like, you know, in society today, those other abuses I just talked about, control, the emotional, the financial, those are not recognized by society as abuse. And that's a crime. That is absolutely not right, because those are abuse. So if you lived with any of those, or if some of you listening who still are living in abuse, if any of those are in your realities, you are being abused. If he's smirking at you or using negative comments toward you, or spits or punches holes in the walls, he doesn't hit you directly. But all those things are abuse, and now we're going to talk about physical abuse. For me, physical abuse didn't start for about 5 years, and I was shocked, and I thought, well, now people are going to understand what I'm living in, but they didn't. They didn't, because society doesn't want to know. But it is bruising and having some kind of proof, which is considered bruising or broken bones or whatever, and sometimes that doesn't even hold up in court. We're in a quandary here, folks, but it's important for me that women who have lived in abuse or are living in abuse understand what abuse is. And physical abuse is, it's horrible, but I'm saying, you know what? Emotional abuse is worse. In my opinion, and you've heard me say that before, emotional abuse is worse than physical. Physical abuse, we all understand. It's black eyes, it's bruised arms. Now, my abuser would bruise me where it didn't show. So it would be on my arms or on my thighs, but mostly my arms and mostly my arms and my sides. But so I would wear long sleeves and it never would show. Never was I bruised on my face. He knew. He knew. And a lot of abusers know that bruises show. And if they show, or I made excuses. You know, if I had a bruise on my forearm, I would say, oh, well, I ran into a wall or whatever. We do that. And you know what? That's just feeding into the abuse, but it's protecting ourselves too, because it's not easy. It's not easy to admit that you lived in financial control or control at all, or in emotional abuse. And somehow physical, we finally get it. But a lot of people live for years and years and years and never are physically abused. But there's holes in their walls, and they get spit on, and they get called names, and they get smirks and nasty comments. That is abuse. So that's what I want. That's what I'm talking about. This video, my business, Surviving Abuse Network, really is about supporting women who have left abuse. But I know I'm attracting a lot of women who still live in it. And some of them still say, but I've lived with him for 10 years. I have 3 kids. How could I be living in abuse if I've stayed that long and I've got those kids? Well, you did. You are. And don't play the games. Don't play the head games. That's part of it. It's what we do. It's normal. It's not your fault. It's something that you learned how to do. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is I'm going to call it reflect. Reflect on the glory of creating your true self. And that will get you through. It's hard once we leave. It's dangerous once we leave. But it's hard, too, to create a life because we've got all that stuff, all that nasty shit in our heads that we've lived through, whether it was 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or 34 years like me or 40 or 50 years like I've heard other women say. That's all still there. And we have to process that. We have to let it go. We have to create a new perspective for how to look at that. And that is about building our own authentic lives. And hold on to that and let that be the thing that gets you through leaving the abuse or staying out. Stay out. And I'm going to tell you this, you've heard it over and over, I'm going to say it again. If we don't change, nothing changes. Someone said to me the other day, we tend to pull the wool over our eyes, and we don't want to see what's really going on. That's not our fault. It's just something we do. It's self-protection. It's okay. It's all right. But at some point, let's take responsibility and say, this is what we're doing. On some level, we know that we've lived in some kind of abuse, and it's time to let that go. We are entitled. We are entitled to create wonderful, wonderful, safe lives. I've done that, but it took work. It took a lot of work for me to get to the point that I am now. And you can do the work too. And it doesn't have to be ugly work. It doesn't have to be bad. It can be a lot of fun. Find ways that you enjoy, that you can excavate. And I call it excavate because we have to dig ourselves out. We're buried. We are buried way, way down inside because of the abuse. And we have to dig ourselves out. I call it excavate. But when you start doing that work, it is so fantastic because you're learning about who you are. You're discovering that you do have your own ideas. I discovered that I am a good businesswoman. I discovered that I have great things to share with other women. And a lot of what I share, obviously, is the horror and the terror and the nastiness of having lived in abuse. So I did not deserve that. I did not bring it on myself, but I did walk into it. It did feed me. It did do something for me. I guess I felt like I was kind of a savior. I guess I thought that I was the one who could keep him between the lines. I was the one that was the strong one and the smart one and the sane one. And that was my payoff. But that is not a reason to stay. And I believed if I loved him enough, and if I worked hard enough, and if I did all the right things, that I didn't say the things he didn't want to hear, and I didn't do things that made him mad, that he would stop being so angry. But that's not my responsibility, and it's not yours. So there's the cycle. It starts with control. Generally, it starts with control. Then it goes into emotional, a lot of financial, and then it goes into physical. That's the cycle. But here's the cool thing. You can break that cycle, and that is your choice. It's your choice to break that cycle, to create the life that you love and be able to say, you know what, I am worth it. I deserve better, and I'm going to do that for me. I'm going to do that for me. So do it. Do it. If you listen to my videos and my podcasts, and if you read my blogs, there are a lot of suggestions that I give, things that work for me to create who I am, to excavate who I am, and to create a life that I love, and you can do that too. My name is Mickey Zeta, and I'm happy to have you here. My business is called Surviving Abuse Network, and my website is survivingabusenetwork.com. I'm also going to invite you to go to my Patreon page. I create videos, create videos and blogs and Facebook podcasts. And I do this everything I offer is for free. Everything that I'm doing so far is for free. And it costs money. It costs money to have a podcast producer and to put out the things that I do and to have the backup that I have. And I'm going to ask you to go to patreon.com, Patreon, patreon.com/Mickey, MICKIE, J Zeta, ZADA. Patreon.com at Mickey. Patreon.com/Mickey J Zeta. And please help support this program because what I do for free. I do it to help women who walked out with nothing and they can't afford to pay for the coaching or for the ideas. And I contact a lot of people personally by phone and by email and by text. And I do what I can to help those women who have left abuse. So please help support me and for doing what I'm doing and support these women because I'm offering things that are changing lives, and I'm so proud of that. It's my mission, it's my passion, it's my focus. Patreon.com/Mickey J Zeta. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're here, and I will see you on Wednesday night again.